Hello, everybody. We are about to dive into JavaScript, which is a programming language that is very different from HTML and CSS. But if you learn JavaScript, you'll be able to learn pretty much any other programming language. Now, there's two different ways that you may be going about this course. You may have already completed the CSS and HTML sections and you're done with those. Or if you're in the condensed version, the 7-week version of the course, you may have just started with HTML and you're learning JavaScript alongside it. It's okay. You only need to know a few things about HTML in order to get going with the JavaScript, but I'll show you what I mean in just a second here. I created a little page here, if I can find it, that will get us started with JavaScript. Okay, let me crank this up just a little bit bigger, make it like that. Okay, so now again, I'm not sure how far you've gotten with HTML and CSS yet. You may have just started with HTML, and that's okay, but I just want to give you an overview of the three languages that we use to build web pages. All right, so HTML is what we call the content aspect of it, and that's how you can structure your content, as they say. That's how you can decide what content shows up as big and bold, and other content might show up in a list or something like that. So they call that the content part of that handles the content of a web page, how you structure your content. CSS is what we call the presentation layer. A layer, that's the word I'm looking for. That's the CSS is the presentation. So we use CSS code to make a web page present well. In other words, look really good. And then finally, JavaScript is what we call the behavior layer. And that's what gives your pages behavior, or it makes them interactive. So anyways, that's what JavaScript can add to your web page. And if that sounds strange, hang on a second. I'll try and explain it. So what does that mean, behavior? Well, it's the way your page behaves. So for example, here's some ways you can add behavior to your page. One thing that we use JavaScript for is what we call event handling. So I can make things happen if the user clicks on something. So here, if I click on this right here, it pops up this alert window. Nothing fancy, but it shows you the way this page behaves. When I click on this, the page behaves by showing me this. So that's kind of what we mean by the behavior. Okay, so you can do a lot of things to add behavior to your page, and we'll be learning a lot about them along the way right here. The other thing that JavaScript is super important for is what we call validating user input. So I created a little form right here, and I want to show you, it says enter a number, and I want to show you what happens if I don't enter a number. So I'll just enter something that's not a number, and then here's JavaScript. It's JavaScript code is showing this a little message here saying, please enter a number. Okay, so this is what we call validating user input, and it's a really important thing for programmers to know how to do. We have to work really hard to make sure that our input or data doesn't get corrupted with garbage. So here, in order to make that go away, I have to actually enter a number. So I'll enter a number and hit tab, and then JavaScript is making that message go away. Okay, we can also use JavaScript for things like animation. Here's just a very stupid, simple example, but if I click the button, the little box gets animated. Okay, now nowadays you can actually create 3D games with JavaScript, so that's pretty cool. So that's a lot more complicated than the example that I just showed you. Another thing that we can do with JavaScript, and this is a big deal, and this is what we get into later in the program here, is we can write JavaScript code that will fetch data from the internet. So here, when you click this button here, it's fetching data, and I'm showing that data right inside of this alert window right here. Don't worry about this. This data might look strange now, but we'll understand it later. But anyways, it's data about some books, 3 books actually, and each book has a title and an author. So if you can't see that on the screen, that's okay. You don't really need to see it, but it's some raw data. Okay, so we can do JavaScript to fetch data from the internet. And then once we do, we usually want to display that as output to the user in some way. And you can do something like this. So once we've got the data, I'm going to click on this button right here. We want to display it to the user. So that's JavaScript code that's adding this stuff to the page right here. So here we got our 3 books with the title and the author. Okay, so those are just a few things that you can do with JavaScript, but it is known as the behavior layer of a web page. All right, so are you ready to dive in and start writing JavaScript code? Here I am in VS Code, and these are the files that we've been working with throughout this course. We're going to start to put all of our sample code inside this JavaScript folder here. If you open that up, you'll see I've got a bunch of worksheets in there, so you'll be doing those throughout the course. What I want you to do right now is right-click on the JavaScript folder and choose New File. And let's just call it Introducing JavaScript like this, introducing-javascript.html. So we're going to put all of our JavaScript code inside of an HTML file. So you can go ahead and name your file that or something else. Oh, I spelled it wrong. I got to be careful. Introducing, okay, there we go. Whatever. Okay, the file name doesn't matter too much, but anyways, create an HTML file, and we're going to get started with JavaScript right here. So go ahead and hit enter. And now you do need to know just a very little bit about HTML to do this JavaScript course, but you don't need to know much about HTML. So what I want to do is, hopefully you already know this trick in VS Code, but go ahead and type in HTML and hit enter. Now, in the previous lessons, we've been using the HTML5 shortcut here. I'm just going to use HTML right here. Yeah, this is fine. So anyways, that's going to create an opening closing HTML tag. And then, as you know, we should have a head element inside of there. And then inside the head goes the title. So I'm going to put in a title element in there like that. And I'll just make that say Introducing JavaScript. Okay, and then now we also have a body, so I'm going to put a body element in there. And then, so you should understand what all of these elements do in HTML. So that's the extent of what you need to know about HTML to get started right here. You should know what the head is for, and the body is for, and the HTML element. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to add an element inside the head here. So go up to the head element. I'm going to actually make this bigger so you can see it a little bit better here. There we go. Hopefully that's easier to read. Okay, now inside the head element, we're going to put a script element. So you can go ahead and type in script like that, and you get a pair of script tags. Split those apart. Now the browser knows that everything that's inside of a script element is JavaScript code. So this is how we can put JavaScript code inside of our page to get started here. There's other ways to put JavaScript code inside of a page, and we'll get into those later. But for now, this is a real simple way for us to do it. Let's go ahead and do the hello world tradition that programmers do. We're going to create just a little program that says hello world, and we'll be off and running with JavaScript right here. So put your cursor inside the script element, and notice that I'm indented a little bit. VS Code will help you with that. Indentation is so important in JavaScript, just like it is in HTML. But here's what I want you to type in. The word alert. And then I want you to put a pair of parentheses after that. So VS Code knows that parentheses always come in pairs. So if you put the opening parentheses in, it'll put the closing one in for you. And then what I want you to do is put a semicolon at the end of that line. Okay, so now there's syntax in JavaScript just like there is in HTML. So you got to pay super close attention to all these characters here. Okay, now what I want you to do is go inside the parentheses like that, and then put a pair of quotation marks. Double quotes or single quotes, doesn't matter. I use double quotes, and again, VS Code knows that double quotes always come in pairs, so all you have to do is type in one, and it will give you the other one. Okay, now inside of those double quotes, let's type in hello world like that, and that's it. That's our whole entire program right now. So go ahead and save your changes, and then let's open this page in the default browser. So you can right click here and do open in default browser. Mine came up over here. Here it is. There we go. And when you load the page, you should see this alert window pop up. And to make it go away, you have to click the OK button. Okay, there's nothing on the page for us to look at. Okay, so yay, we did it. We created our very first JavaScript program, and we followed that time-honored tradition of the hello world as our first program. If you refresh the page, it'll run the program again. So there it is. Okay, now let me go back and explain this code just a tiny bit. So this is a command that I'll call it a command for now, but this is what we call the alert command. It's actually, there's another technical term for it later, but this is a way for you to create a pop-up window, and then whatever you put inside of the parentheses there is going to be displayed inside the window. And then I will talk about what these quotation marks are doing too, but you got to have all that stuff in there typed in just perfect in order for everything to work here. But we'll be using this command a lot so that we can display output. I'm going to talk a little bit more about output in a minute. The very first thing that we're going to dive into deeper in JavaScript are variables. Now, variables are an important part of any programming language. And what you learn here regarding JavaScript, you can apply to any other programming language that you learn. So hopefully you're a little bit aware of variables from math. You know what I'm going to do here? I want to get rid of this alert. Let's just delete it here like this. We'll get that out of our way. Whoops. There we go. So I just deleted that line. And we have an empty script tag again here, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of preview of how we're going to get started with JavaScript. We're going to start by talking about variables. Now, variables are a lot like they are in math, so if you've seen those in math, that'll help. So hopefully you've seen something like this here. I'm going to go ahead and put my cursor right there inside of my script element, and I'm going to create a variable called x, and I'm going to set it equal to 5. Okay, so we'll learn more about variables in the next lesson, but there we go. We've got a variable where x is equal to 5. And then what I could do is something like this. I could use that variable to figure out something else. Like, let's say I'm going to put a question mark there. Now that's not valid JavaScript because I can't use a question mark like that, but hopefully you'll recognize this. I could do x plus 2 like that. Okay, so now I can use the variable x to solve for the question mark there. And so since you're not allowed to use a question mark like this, but I could create another variable, and let's call it sum. Okay, so hopefully this will look familiar to you, and this is actually, I think this is valid JavaScript code right here. So anyways, variables are like the most basic thing we need to talk about. So the first lesson in JavaScript is going to be about variables. We're also going to have to talk about syntax. Syntax are all the characters that you have to use to write a language, or the grammar, as we say. So technically, in order for this to be grammatically correct or syntactically correct, I would have to put semicolons here. So, and I'll explain those semicolons a little bit later. So anyways, this is how we're going to get started with JavaScript, is talking about variables, and hopefully you know about them from math, high school math or something like that. Okay, and then we will be talking a lot about syntax, so we'll be dealing with those semicolons a lot. And then the other thing that I want to do here before we start to dig in is talk about the basic functionality of a program. A computer program really does a couple of things, and just a few things. They collect input and they produce output. Okay, so let's write a little program. We're getting a little bit ahead here, but I want to show you some things that we're going to be using a lot in this course. You can go ahead and just delete that if you've been following along here. And I'm going to create a variable and call it name, and I want to set that equal to, here's another command. Just like the alert that we saw, this one's called prompt. So I want to type in prompt, and you got to spell it right. And then I want to put a pair of parentheses in place. That's the syntax for using these commands. And then I should put a semicolon at the end of that line. The semicolon, you can get away with not putting semicolons in the right place, but I want you to get into the habit of putting semicolons in the right place. And then we're going to move our cursor back into the parentheses right here, and I want you to type in a pair of double quotes. Now you only have to type in one because, as we said earlier, VS Code knows that they come in pairs, so it'll put both quotes there. Those can be single quotes or double quotes. And then what we're going to make it say inside of those quotes is enter your name. Okay, and then I'm going to move to the next line down. You got to eyeball this really good and make sure that you've got everything exactly as I have here. And the capitalization also matters. We'll see that JavaScript is case sensitive, so you have to make sure your capitalization is correct too. Okay, we're going to create another variable, and it's going to be called message. And we're going to set that equal to, now this line's going to look a little bit funny, but I want you to follow along with me. So after the equal sign, we're going to put in a pair of double quotes like that. And again, you only have to type in one. And then inside of the double quotes, let's make it say hello, and then put a space there too. Okay. Now move your cursor to the other side of the double quote, and then you can put a space and then a plus sign. And then we're going to refer to our name variable. All right, you have no idea what's going on right now. This is all brand new, so I'll explain in a second here. Okay, put a semicolon at the end of that line, and then we're going to go back and use the alert command again. So on the next line down, type in alert, and then we have to put a pair of parentheses. Those are the syntax rules for using these commands right here. Inside of the parentheses, type in message, and then move your cursor to the end of that line and put a semicolon there. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff here we need to dig deeper into, but here's a little program that will show you that it's going to collect input with this prompt. You'll see how it does that in a second. And then it's going to process the input in some way, and then it's going to display output. So input and output are the basic functionality of a computer program, and usually it processes data somewhere in between getting input and displaying output. Okay, go ahead and save your changes here, and then open this up in the browser. So go back to your browser and hit refresh, and here we go. Now here's what the prompt command does. Notice how that's different than what we saw the alert. The alert just had a window that displayed some output, but the prompt command allows you to enter input into the program. Okay, so now does this look familiar? It says enter your name. We wrote that in our code, and the purpose of it is to have some instructions here so that the user knows what they're supposed to enter. So I'm going to go ahead and enter my name, and you can enter your name, and then hit OK, and then here's our alert. Okay, so there we go. There's a real tiny little program that collects input, it processes the input. You can see that I just entered my name, but it processed the input by making it say hello and then my name. And then we use the alert command to display some output. Okay, now I know we're getting ahead by showing you these commands, but we're going to be using these commands right off the bat. So back here in our code, we're going to use the prompt command to collect input from the user, and we're going to be using the alert command to display output to the user. And we'll talk more about these commands in lesson 3, I believe it is. So, but I'm going to keep you in the dark a little bit until then. Okay, another thing that I want to show you before we dive in is how you can add comments to your code. So this is useful because a lot of times as a beginner you want to write some code and then make some notes about it. So what I can do here, I'm just going to go to our line right here and put my cursor right above our first line of code. And if I type in 2 forward slashes like that, that means that anything that comes after that on that line is going to be a comment. So I might do something like this. Step 1, gather user input. Okay, so that's just a note to myself. This is not code. This is not going to execute, and it's because the line starts with those 2 forward slashes. But as a beginner and even as an advanced programmer, you're going to want to make notes in your code too. So I might come down here and add another comment above this line. and say like step 2, process the input. So these are just very generic. Whoop, my finger is in the wrong place. These are just generic notes here. Okay, process the input, and then I might come down to this line and write another note that says step 3, display output. Okay, so you can put these notes in your code to help you learn. Our comments here explain what the program's doing. Okay, and another cool trick that we'll be using a lot too is I can actually comment out a line of code so that it won't run. So if for some reason I didn't want to display the output right here, what I can do is I can put the 2 forward slashes in front of that, and that will be ignored then when we run the program, and we wouldn't see the alert window pop up right there. So that's another thing that we'll be doing a lot, is we'll be commenting out code, because you'll see what I mean, but it comes in handy. There is a shortcut to do this, so I'm just going to back this up to the beginning of the line like that. If you press Control and hold it, the Control key, and hold it while you press the forward slash, that will put a comment on whatever line you're on. And if I do the same keyboard shortcut again, Control and forward slash, it will remove the comment. So that toggles comments for a line, and that's a keyboard shortcut that we're going to use a lot in this class. So I'm just kind of giving you a smorgasbord of stuff to help us get started once we dig into variables a little bit more. Another thing is there are a lot of what we call keywords in the JavaScript language. So we created a variable here called name, and we set it equal to whatever the prompt gives us back, whatever the user enters into the prompt. So I've got a variable called name here, and then I've got another variable called message. And don't worry if it's a little bit confusing, because like I said, the next lesson we dig a lot deeper into variables. But whenever you create a variable in JavaScript, you should use a special keyword to do it. So I got away with not doing it, but we really should be using a keyword called let. So go ahead and type in let right there before name, and then also type it in again before message. Okay. So anyways, this is a special keyword. VS Code makes it show up in blue. And there are lots of other keywords that we'll be talking about that have special meaning in JavaScript. So anyways, and there's actually other ones that we can use to create variables, and we'll see those in the next lesson. So as a beginning programmer, you're going to be making lots of mistakes and putting lots of bugs in your code. So right off the bat, I want to show you what you can do when things go wrong. Okay, I'm going to go, let's go here and put a few empty lines before our next line of code here. And let's declare a variable. Let's say we're keeping track of the score, I don't know, of a game or something like that. So go ahead and type in let. Again, we'll talk more about that let keyword in the next lesson. But we want to create a variable called score. And I'm going to set that equal to 98, and then I should put a semicolon there. Again, we'll talk more about the semicolons later. And then let's just say I want to alert the score just like we did with our message variable up here. So on the next line down, I'm going to go ahead and start typing alert, and then I'm inside of the parentheses. So we type in alert, then a pair of parentheses, and then we want to see what the score variable is storing inside the alert. And so this is the way I should set up this line of code. Notice I put that semicolon there too. This is correct, but let me put a problem in here so we can see what happens when things go wrong. I'm going to remove the closing parentheses right there. Okay, and now that's going to cause the program to crash. So I'm going to go ahead and save it. And now we're expecting that our program to show us a prompt, and then to display an alert, and then to display another alert. That's what we're expecting to see when we run this. But because I have a bug, I'll show you what happens when the program crashes. So here I'm going to reload the page, and actually it didn't do anything at all. So it did not work the way I expected it to work. Something went wrong. So none of my alerts or prompts are showing up. So if something goes wrong and it's not working the way you expect, what you should do is press the F12 button on your keyboard. Okay, and that'll bring up this here, which is known as the Web Developer Tools. Okay, we're going to be using these tools a lot. So here there's a tab called console, and it's showing me an error message. So now you won't be able to understand the actual message itself, but if you pay attention, it'll give you a line number. Over here, I can see that the error is happening on line 15. So that's the line I'd want to check in the code. Now, if you didn't get the web developer tools to appear by pressing F12, then some keyboards have an FN button, like in the lower left corner. Sometimes you have to hold the FN key and press F12 at the same time to get the developer tools to show up. Okay, but anyways, a lot of times this will be like a cryptic error message right here, but what you want to get is a line number, which you can find over here if you're using Chrome. So let's go check out line 15. That's what it says right there. So I go back to my code and I go to line 15. Now, sometimes the line number is not going to be exactly correct, but it usually is correct. And I can start looking for a syntax error or a bug there. So anyways, hopefully I would spot it and I would put in that missing character right there. Okay, so I just wanted to show you this because as a beginner, you'll be making lots of mistakes, and I want you to know that you can open up the web developer tools and look for an error message in the console. Okay, so a moment ago, we talked about displaying output and how we can use the alert command to do that. I do want to show you, now that I've told you about the console log, I want to show you another command that you can use to see output. So we fixed our bug right here, but instead of using the alert command to display the score as output, I want to use a different command. So go to this line right here and delete the word that says alert, and then type this in, console.log. Okay, so that's a different command, and it's going to display output, but it's going to display it in the console log. So if you save your changes here and go back to the browser, and now we fixed the bug, but I'm going to refresh the page. So it's rerunning our program. I guess I have to enter my name again to get through the prompt, and there's the alert. And now we should see the console log, which is down here. So there's the score. It says 98. So this is another way to display output, and we're going to use it a lot in when we're learning JavaScript here. The nice thing about the console is that I don't have to click OK to get on with the program. The alerts will actually pause your program until you click OK to get rid of the alert, and then it'll execute the lines that come after that. Okay, so we will be using console log a lot to display output, but obviously users of a web page don't know about this. So if we need to make sure that the user sees some output, we'll use an alert instead. Okay, one last thing before we wrap up our intro to JavaScript. Let's go ahead and remove everything from the script element. So we're going to empty it out again. There we go. So now I've got an empty script element. And I'm going to go ahead and just paste this code into place and have you practice typing it in. So you can just copy this. And this is challenging for beginning programmers to be able to copy something exactly to get it to work. So here, I'm going to go ahead and copy this little program right here. And then I'm going to actually, now those lines should be indented. It should be indented inside the script element like that. But here's a little program. Okay, and I'll just walk you through what it does, but I want you to try to type this in and get it to work here. So it declares, or it creates a variable called Celsius, and then it uses that prompt command to prompt our user to enter a temperature in Celsius. I should really have a semicolon right there, but it won't break if I don't. So, okay, and then so that's the first line. Collect some input from the user by prompting them to enter a temperature in Celsius. Then it's going to process the information and convert the degrees Celsius into Fahrenheit. So we've got this equation right here that converts what the Celsius variable into Fahrenheit. And then finally, we'll display the output. We'll display the temperature in Fahrenheit. So go ahead and type that in and see if you can get that to work. And now it sounds really easy, but if you've never done programming like this before, it can actually be a little bit challenging because there's so much syntax involved here. So this will be a good exercise for you to get started, and it'll hopefully help you start to pay attention to all the syntax that you see right here. Okay, last thing, I'm just going to save the changes, and then I'm going to run it in the browser here. And so I'll refresh, and here's how it should work. If I enter a temperature in Celsius, I'm going to enter 32 and press OK. Apparently it's 89.6 degrees in Fahrenheit. So that's how this thing is supposed to work. Okay, and now we're ready to dive into JavaScript and dig deeper into variables.